Today I want to talk about my winter TBR, my winter reading. I have a pretty lengthy list. I've sectioned into 4 parts because I'm a mood reader. Because I'm a mood reader. Oh my god, I can't say it. Because I'm a mood reader and my tastes change all the time. So I'm hoping this will keep me interested and keep me focused. Because these are books that are all on my TBR that I've wanted to read. It gets really cold in the Midwest, it gets really cold in Minnesota, and the winter can be brutal. So I want to have some books set up for whatever mood I'm in, so we can get started. First grouping is for a cold snow day. I'm expecting this winter to be rough like the others have been since I moved here. Get a lot of snow and things just kind of shut down. You can't go anywhere and you're just stuck at home with a heated blanket, a warm beverage, and hopefully a good book. So, Mac! Okay, so the first book we're going to talk about is The Terror by Dan Simmons. This is a hefty book. This is about men aboard the HMS Terror in 1865. They are stranded in the Arctic Circle with food and coal rations dwindling and little hope for being saved or getting out. And the men discover there's something dark and sinister and dangerous outside in the dark that's pursuing them. And it's getting closer and closer. I've heard a lot of good things about Dan Simmons' writing. I think this will probably be the chunkiest book that I have on this list. It is clocking in at 766 pages. So it's been a minute since I've read historical fiction, and there's actually quite a few on this full list. So I'm really excited to get back to that because that's how I fell in love with reading to begin with, was historical fiction. Next is Disappearing Earths by Julia Phillips. I bought this when it came out, and I still have not read it. I don't know what mood I'm waiting for, but I think this will fit in this slot very well. This is about 2 sisters who are abducted in Siberia, and the novel follows this wide cast of characters in the town who may or may not be involved, and it's set against the backdrop of this really rugged landscape of dense forest, cold tundras, icy volcano landscapes, and the sea between Japan and Alaska. The premise of it sounds really intriguing to me, the mystery, and then set against what I can only assume is a very harsh and unforgiving landscape. So that's next. Third book in cold snow day is Beartown by Fredrick Backman. This is my first Fredrick Backman, and I have seen this book everywhere. This is set in a very small community nestled in a dense forest in Sweden. This town is called Beartown, and the main source of livelihood for the town is the hockey team that has a very strong chance at winning the semifinals this year. However, during said semifinals, an act of violence shakes the entire town and turns everything on its head, and the town is left in turmoil as accusations and rumors fly. I didn't know this was a trilogy until recently, so that makes me even more excited to pick it up and be part of a world for 3 books. Beartown. Lastly, on cold snow day, Close Range, Wyoming Stories by Anne, I'm gonna pronounce her name wrong, Proulx? Anne Proulx? Okay, let's back up. Annie Proulx. This is the author who wrote Brokeback Mountain, which is also included in the short story collection, but it's all set against the very harsh, unforgiving landscape of Wyoming. I think it's mostly in the winter these stories are set in, and it shows the author's love of Wyoming, its people. I know the very first story is supposed to be really unsettling. It's called The Half-Skinned Steer. I know it's based off of a folklore legend or Swedish folklore. And again, it's been a minute since I've read a short story collection, and the cover is so pretty. I'm excited to dive in. It has been a while since I've read a short story collection, so I'm very excited to dive into this because I loved Brokeback Mountain and I've wanted to read more of her work. I have like 3 of her books downstairs and I've not read her yet, besides Brokeback Mountain, which I loved. So that wraps up Cold Snow Day. The next I'm really excited about, because I previously mentioned my love of historical fiction. I am diving headlong into this with this next section. medieval winter. Okay. Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This follows the author's intense fascination with how the story Hamlet was conceived. It's set in the 1580s in Warwickshire. This follows a woman who is very much sought after for her own unusual interest and abilities, and her husband, and she has 3 kids, a daughter and twins, Judith and Hamnet. And Hamnet dies when he is 11, and years later, the father writes a play called Hamlet. I think this also has to do with the plague, which I'm very interested in reading about from a historical fiction perspective, or the fever or something. It has to do with an intense sickness, which I can only assume the time period has to do with the plague. I like Shakespeare a lot. Hamlet is one of my favorite plays, and I'm interested in a different kind of perspective in that. And I've heard nothing but great things about Maggie O'Farrell's writing. So this one's on the shorter side. I'm just excited for this whole, I'm just gonna keep saying that for this whole section because it's just been a minute since I've gotten into historical fiction. Another one that has been on my shelf since it came out, I haven't picked it up. I really, really, really want to, because this is also it's one of the last entries for my 1001 books you need to read before you die list, and that is Tyll by Daniel Kehlmann. I just need to stop embarrassing myself. This is an account of a 17th century performer and vagabond, Tyll. It follows him from childhood, where his dad, who is a miller but also practices alchemy and magic, and when he's found out by the church, Tyll flees, and he finds companionship in a traveling performer who shows Tyll his trade. The novel follows Tyll as he travels across the continent that's devastated by the 30 Years' War, and just the crazy cast of characters he comes in contact with. I just love this cover. It's so sick. The other covers or other editions of this, like, oh, they're just so good. The covers are so good. And, oof. Yeah, I'm very interested in, more so now that it was on my other list, but this just sounds so sick. The covers. Yeah. Next is a book that I've had people recommend to me, and I've had people say don't read it. And I'm interested to see what I think about it. It's also been on my shelf for a while. Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantell. This is, I think, book 1 in her 3-book series about Thomas Cromwell. So this is the first installment. Set in England in 1520, the country is on the brink of ruin if King Henry doesn't produce an heir. King Henry VIII doesn't produce an heir. He wants to annul his marriage with Anne Boleyn, which the people and the Pope are so against. And in steps Thomas Cromwell to bring a solution, but at what cost? I've heard people say this is the most boring book they've ever read. And I've also heard people say they could not put it down. I think it might take a minute for me to get into just perusing the first few pages, but I'm just so, I'm so interested in this time period. Medieval historical fiction is one of my, favorite things ever. I've always been interested in, I think it started with, my fascination with King Arthur and Knights of the Round Table and, adventures. I think it's mostly, the going on adventures, going on quests. That's why I love playing RPGs so much. Elden Ring was one of my I played the hell out of that game. I played 130 hours in that game just because I liked the quest aspect of it, and armor and swords and fighting and duels. And yeah, I think that's it. Last book, which is a historical fiction or historical fiction fantasy, The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro. I haven't even read it. I've only seen the movie. I have read Remains of the Day, and I've seen the movie Never Let Me Go. Apparently this is completely different, completely opposite of those kinds of books. Like I said, it has more of a magical realism fantasy element to it. Set in Europe after the death of King Arthur, an older couple dimly remembers that they have a son, and they go on a journey to find him. This just sounds like it could be so compelling, and I think I'm very interested in the fantasy element of it, and I know this is a very well-beloved book of his, and it's just, I didn't even look inside the dust jacket. Yeah. I do like his writing style. If that is still the same in this book, not so much the story, but his writing style is still the same, I think I will enjoy it very much. The next section I'm calling Warming Up, just for those negative degree days that we have so many of in January and February. I just need a bit of heat, whether it's romance or the time and place, or it literally has to do with fire and heat. I don't have the first one I'm expecting for Christmas. 7 Days in June. There you are. It's a romance that I've had my eye on for a long time. Me not being a romance girl, I think that says something because I've just heard absolutely exquisite things about this book. This follows two authors, Eva and Shane, who reconnect during a steamy week in Brooklyn for a literary event. And this raises the eyebrows of the literary community at large. But they don't know that 20 years previously, they had known each other as teenagers and had also had a week-long romance that I don't know if it ended. I don't know that yet, if it ended or something happened. Obviously something happened where they have not been in contact, except they've been writing to each other through their own published works. It's such a good premise. I had to get that one for Christmas. Hi, Mom. Next one is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Only read Evelyn Hugo. I know there's another book that has Evelyn in the title that has 7. So I'm going to butcher. So I'm just going to say Evelyn Hugo. 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Whatever. I really liked it. This one is a more, from what I've read, is more of a thriller, I would guess. This is set during an enormous end of summer party held by 4 very famous siblings whose lives are changed forever over the course of the night. Secrets, lies, and love all come to the surface as their incredibly large mansion burns to the ground. I'm excited for the mystery and intrigue of this famous family. The downfall potentially of this the potential downfall of this famous family and what nasty secrets they have. I love that kind of shit. Next, I also had this book on my shelf for a very long time, and I'm laughing because I almost picked it up like a few months ago for the summer read, and it just didn't happen. So I had to add to the list. Mostly Dead Things by Kristen Arnett, and this is set in very humid and steamy Florida. A family is snowed in with their own grief as the patriarch of their family commits suicide in the family taxidermy business. And Jessa, the oldest, is the one who finds him and then steps up to take care of the taxidermy business. The rest of her surrounding family falls apart. Her mom's way of grieving is to start making increasingly lewd art with the taxidermied animals in the shop. Her brother is completely a wreck, completely fallen into despair. His wife, Bren, disappears without a trace, and the narrator, main character Jessa, says that this is the only person she's ever been in love with. Now Jessa is forced to confront her feelings toward her family and make sense of the grief that is taking them all over. This is supposed to be like more of a very dark comedy, which is so my jam. I like that it has to do with taxidermy and nasty stuff, so I'm excited. And lastly, a book that literally has to do with fire and heat, Firestarter by Stephen King. Because I want to read the rest of Stephen King's bibliography. I've only read maybe 10 out of his entire works. More of his earlier works that fall into this vein, but I have not read all, so I'm going to start with Firestarter. It starts with 2 patients who are at a scientific research facility, and they have pyrokinetic powers. They fall in love, they get married, and they have a kid who has the same abilities, and now the government wants to get this kid back, and use it as a weapon. I've heard it's also like more of a road story too, as well as like a thriller, so I'm excited. I've seen clips of the movie with Drew Barrymore as a scary child. So that's who I'm going to envision when I'm reading this. Very last one is just random books I've been eyeing for a while and want to read. So the first book I'm going to talk about is The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. I've not read any other Anne Patchett. I also have Commonwealth sitting on my shelf. I don't know what to tell you. I'm a book hoarder. I have a problem. I like collecting books and they just sits on my shelf. Maybe one day I'll get in the mood for it. But I did want to start this because I think my mom read this and she really, really liked it. This follows two siblings, Danny and Maeve, in their childhood home, the Dutch house, which was purchased by their father, and it sets off basically the undoing of the entire family. The mom, after the purchase of the house, decides to run off. There's a stepmother involved. It mainly follows the siblings Danny and Maeve and their kids and their families within the Dutch house and their relationships. Love a good family saga that spans decades and generations. So this one sounded like a good mix to put in. Next, I'm really excited about this one. Well, it's almost 700 pages. Royal Assassin. This is book 2 in the Firestarter trilogy by Robin Hobb. I read Assassin's Apprentice earlier this year. Absolutely loved it. I myself am just kind of getting into reading more fantasy after having a very long hiatus, more adult fantasy, I guess I would say. And Robin Hobb was a name I kept hearing over and over and over again, so I did pick up the Firestarter trilogy to get started on the Realm of the Elderlings, the world, I think it's 13 books by Robin Hobb. I can't say that much about book 2 without really spoiling book 1, but I will say this follows a royal bastard, Fitz Chivalry, who in Assassin's Apprentice, really no one wants anything to do with him. They don't want to not acknowledge him because he could be a liability later down the line, but they also don't want to acknowledge him because he'd be a rival to the throne. So he's kind of in this weird in-between, he's involved, not involved, but then he is brought in to learn more about the court, how to hold yourself in court and manners and sword fighting and scribe work, but he's also taught in the art of assassinism, of the art of what it means to be an assassin. So this is book 2, picking up more on his story where book 1 left off, but that's all I'm going to say about it because I don't want to spoil anything. Next is The Changeling by Victor Lavelle. This is a horror fantasy, which I can't say that I've read a horror fantasy, at least in a while, that centers around two parents, new parents, Apollo and Emma, and their baby boy. Soon after the birth of their baby boy, Emma commits a horrific act and then flees with their son. Apollo then embarks on an odyssey to find them. And this is all I've heard described as an odyssey, that he goes on this magical realism fantasy type of adventure. Very, very much intrigued. I know the show has Lakeith Stanfield, who I adore as an actor, so that's who I'm going to have pictured in my head for this. Lastly, rounding up random books I'm eyeing is Birnam Wood by Eleanor Catton. I read The Luminaries like in 2016 or 2017 because I was stupidly making my way down the list of Man Booker prizes. I haven't had a lot of luck with Man Booker winners, so it was kind of a flunk. I don't remember that much about the book. I thought it was absurdly overly complicated to do with the zodiac and the moon phases and the stars, and like I honestly can't even tell you what it was about. There was beautiful prose in it for sure, like she can write, but anyway, this is supposed to be a lot easier, digestible, insane from what I've heard. It's following a guerrilla gardening group, and I think this is set in New Zealand, like most of her work is. She's a New Zealand writer. The leader of this guerrilla group, Mira, is struggling to find a permanent home and a way to make ends meet. And the group discovers a large, seemingly abandoned and unforgotten farmland, giant piece of land. But there's a rival force, an American billionaire named Robert Lemoyne. Robert Lemoyne. He has his sights on it to build his end of times, end of world bunker. And he suggests they join forces, but can he be trusted? Regan over at Proulx Project read this earlier this year, and I guess her reaction to it just sounded like it was an insane, crazy, jaw-dropping book. One of those. But that's it. The sun is going down, and that is my winter TBR. The sun is going down, and it is not even 4 o'clock. I'm going to finish this video with a very big thank you for watching. Thank you for clicking. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will have more videos for you soon. Bye!